The rain came down in sheets that afternoon, turning the dirt road into a river of mud that swallowed the tires of her old pickup truck. Evelyn Harper gripped the steering wheel until her knuckles whitened, her vision blurred not just by the storm but by the ghost of Lila's laughter echoing from the passenger seat where no one sat anymore. 6 months since the crash, and every mile marker on the highway back to Willow Creek felt like a fresh incision into the scar tissue of her heart. She pulled into the driveway just as thunder cracked the sky open, the kind of sound that made you wonder if the heavens themselves were grieving too. She slammed the door behind her, the screen rattling like an afterthought, and collapsed onto the kitchen floor amid the groceries that scattered like fallen leaves, apples rolling under the table, a loaf of bread splitting open on the linoleum. The house, once filled with Lila's sketches pinned to every wall, and the scent of her chamomile tea, now echoed with silence so profound it pressed against Evelyn's chest like a weight she couldn't lift. She curled into herself, knees drawn up, and let the sobs come, raw and unfiltered, until the front door creaked open on its own, pushed by the wind, inviting the storm inside. That was how it began again, the unraveling she thought she'd stitched shut. Willow Creek, this sleepy stretch of North Carolina coastline where the pines whispered secrets to the sea, had always been her refuge, a place where the salt air could heal what the world broke. But since Lila's death, twisted metal and a deer in the headlights on a fog-shrouded road outside Raleigh, Evelyn had become a shadow in her own life. The cottage they shared, with its wraparound porch overlooking the marshlands, felt like a museum of what was lost. Lila's easel still by the window, brushes caked in dried paint, the quilt they pieced together on lazy Sundays, now draped over a chair like a shroud. Evelyn rose slowly, wiping her face with the sleeve of her flannel shirt, and began picking up the spilled bags. Her hands trembled as she righted the apples, their red skins bruised like her own resolve. At 32, she was adrift in a sea of firsts without Lila, the first autumn leaves turning without her hand to trace their veins, the first storm season where the thunder didn't lead to tangled limbs under the covers. She worked as a librarian in town, shelving stories of other people's happily ever afters while her own pages yellowed and curled at the edges. Friends had tried with casseroles and sympathetic nods, but their words bounced off the walls she'd built, high as the dunes that buffered the shore from tempests. It was the garden that finally cracked her open that week. Lila had loved it fiercely, coaxing azaleas and hydrangeas from the sandy soil with a patience Evelyn envied. Now, overgrown and wild, it mocked her neglect. One evening, as the sun dipped low and painted the sky in bruised purples, Evelyn grabbed the shears and attacked the weeds with a vengeance born of desperation. Thorns snagged her skin, drawing beads of blood that she ignored, hacking at the intruders as if they carried the weight of her grief. That's when Riley Summers appeared, leaning over the low fence that separated their properties, her silhouette sharp against the fading light. Riley was the neighbor Evelyn had inherited with the house, a 40-acre plot of farmland that bled into the cottage's edge, where she raised goats and grew heirloom tomatoes under the relentless Carolina sun. At 35, Riley was all sinew and sun-kissed skin, her short-cropped auburn hair perpetually tousled by the wind, hazel eyes sharp as the switchblade she kept in her boot for mending fences. She wore faded overalls stained with earth, a life etched into every line of her broad-shouldered frame, a transplant from the rugged hills of Montana who had washed up in Willow Creek 5 years back, chasing whispers of quieter horizons. "You call that gardening?" Riley's voice cut through the snip of Evelyn's shears, laced with that dry western drawl that grated like sand in a shoe. She nodded at the mangled rosebush Evelyn had just decapitated, its blooms scattered like confetti from a funeral. Evelyn straightened, wiping sweat from her brow, her chest heaving. "Mind your own damn plot, Summers. Last I checked, this fence doesn't make you the queen of green thumbs." Riley's laugh was short, bark-like, devoid of warmth. "Queen? Honey, I'm just trying to keep your massacre from spilling over here. Those roots are invasive, much like your attitude, I'd say. Lila wouldn't have let you butcher her babies like this." The mention of Lila's name was a slap, swift and stinging. Evelyn's shears clattered to the ground, her vision narrowing to the fence between them, that flimsy barrier of weathered pine slats. "You don't get to say her name. You didn't know her. You don't know a thing about this." Riley's jaw tightened, her hands flexing at her sides as if itching to mend something broken. I knew enough to see how she lit up this place. And now? You're turning it into a graveyard. If you're gonna grieve, at least do it without taking the whole neighborhood down with you. Words flew then, sharp as the thorns that had pricked Evelyn's palms. Accusations of intrusion, retorts about isolation. The air thick with the salt of unspoken wounds. Evelyn stormed inside, slamming the door so hard the windows rattled, while Riley shook her head and retreated to her barn, the goats bleating softly in the twilight as if sensing the fracture. That argument lingered like humidity in the air, a storm cloud that refused to break, and Evelyn nursed it in the dark hours, replaying Riley's words until they carved deeper than the loss itself. Days blurred into weeks, the argument festering like an untreated cut. Evelyn avoided the garden, letting the weeds reclaim it, a tangled metaphor for her own heart. She drove into town for shifts at the library, where the scent of aged paper offered a temporary balm, rows of books standing sentinel against the chaos of memory. Willow Creek's library was a relic, its oak shelves groaning under volumes donated by generations of fishermen and farmers, the kind of place where whispers carried farther than shouts. Patrons came for the quiet, but Evelyn found it mocking, couples browsing romance sections hand in hand, children giggling over picture books while she alphabetized alone, her fingers tracing titles like the art of losing without irony. One afternoon, as rain pattered against the tall windows, a regular named Clara, an elderly widow with silver hair pinned in a loose bun, slid a mug of chamomile across the circulation desk. "You look like you could use this, dear. Lila's favorite, wasn't it?" Evelyn's throat closed around the kindness, her eyes stinging. Clara had been Lila's patron, commissioning portraits of her grandchildren that captured their mischief in watercolor strokes. "How did you know?" Clara's smile was soft, lined with the wisdom of outliving too many sunsets. "I see her in you still. The way you tilt your head when you're lost in a story. But grief. It's a thief, Evelyn. Steals the light if you let it." Evelyn nodded, sipping the tea that burned her tongue, a small penance. That night, back in the cottage, she pulled out Lila's sketchbook, flipping through pages of coastal scenes, the marsh at high tide, gulls wheeling against storm clouds. One drawing stopped her cold. A rough outline of two women on the porch, arms entwined, the horizon stretching endless before them. Lila had captioned it "Us Against the Waves." Evelyn traced the lines with a fingertip, the paper thin as hope, and wept until dawn crept in, gray and unforgiving. The breakdown came on a Friday, the kind of ordinary day that ambushes you. Evelyn was midway through shelving returns when a young couple entered, their laughter light as sea foam, fingers laced as they scanned the new arrivals. She watched from the ladder, a pang so acute it stole her breath, the casual intimacy she and Lila had taken for granted, stolen in an instant. The ladder wobbled, books tumbling like dominoes, and she followed them down, crashing to the carpet in a heap of bruised knees and splintered resolve. Clara was there in seconds, her hands steady as she helped Evelyn to the back office, murmuring comforts while the couple hovered awkwardly at the desk. "Breathe, child. The world's not ending, even when it feels like it is." But it had ended, hadn't it? In the sterile glow of the office lamp, Evelyn confessed in fragments, the accident report she'd memorized, the empty side of the bed, the way Willow Creek's beauty now mocked her solitude. Clara listened without interruption, her presence a quiet anchor, until Evelyn's words trailed into silence. "You're not alone in this tide, Evelyn. But you have to let the waves pull you under before they can carry you back to shore." She drove home in a daze, the wipers slashing at the drizzle like accusations. The cottage loomed dark against the pines, its porch light flickering erratically, a bulb Lila had meant to replace. Evelyn bypassed it, heading straight for the garden shed where Lila's tools gathered dust. She dragged out the old wheelbarrow, filling it with wilted clippings, the physical act a rebellion against paralysis. Moonlight silvered the blades of grass as she worked, sweat mingling with tears, the soil cool and yielding beneath her nails. Riley's silhouette appeared again, this time unbidden, her boots crunching on the gravel path. She carried a lantern that cast long shadows, her face unreadable in the glow. "Need a hand? Or are you still hell-bent on solo warfare?" Evelyn paused, spade mid-air, the argument's echo still bitter on her tongue. "What do you want, Riley?" Another round of neighborly critique. Riley set the lantern down, rolling up her sleeves to reveal forearms corded with muscle from years of wrangling fence posts and stubborn livestock. I want to say I was out of line. Lila's garden. It's sacred ground. I shouldn't have poked at it. The apology hung between them, fragile as the first crocus after frost. Evelyn lowered the spade, dirt crumbling from its edge. You think words fix weeds? Or hearts? No, Riley admitted, her voice low, threaded with something raw. But silence doesn't either. Let me help. Just for tonight. They worked side by side in the lantern's circle, the night alive with cricket song and the distant roar of waves. Riley's hands were sure, pruning with a gentleness that belied her earlier sharpness, sharing stories of Montana winters where she'd learned to graft apple trees against blizzards. Evelyn listened, the rhythm of their labor loosening the knot in her chest, if only a fraction. As the wheelbarrow filled, she caught Riley glancing at her, not with pity but curiosity, as if seeing past the thorns to the bloom beneath. By midnight, the garden looked less like a battlefield, the air scented with turned earth and possibility. Riley straightened, brushing soil from her palms. It's a start. Gardens don't heal overnight, but they remember. Evelyn nodded, the weight on her shoulders fractionally lighter. Thank you for showing up. Riley's smile was tentative, a crack in her armor. Anytime. Neighbors, right? She left then, the lantern bobbing like a firefly into the dark, and Evelyn stood alone under the stars, the spade heavy in her grip. For the first time in months, the silence felt less like an enemy and more like a pause, a breath before the next wave. The days following that midnight truce unfolded like pages in a half-read novel, tentative and textured. Evelyn woke to birdsong filtering through the salt-streaked windows, the cottage bathed in the soft gold of Carolina mornings. She brewed coffee strong as regret, black and unadorned, and carried it to the porch where Lila's rocking chair creaked in the breeze. From there she could see Riley's farm. The red barn squat against the skyline, goats milling in their pen like punctuation marks in a pastoral sentence, the field stitched with rows of sunflowers nodding toward the sun. Work at the library pulled her back into rhythm, though the ache lingered, a dull throb beneath her ribs. Clara had taken to leaving notes in the suggestion box, quotes from poets like Mary Oliver, reminders that wild geese call you home despite the wanderings. Evelyn pinned one to her bulletin board. You do not have to be good. You do not have to walk on your knees for 100 miles through the desert repenting. It felt like permission, small but seismic. One afternoon, as she catalogued donations from the estate sale of old Mr. Hargrove, a box of leather-bound classics yellowed by tobacco smoke, the bell above the door jingled. Riley stepped in, hat in hand, her boots leaving faint imprints on the rug. She scanned the room with the wariness of someone unused to enclosed spaces, her eyes landing on Evelyn behind the desk. Figured I'd return the favor, Riley said, sliding a mason jar across the counter. Inside, wildflowers bobbed in cloudy water, Queen Anne's lace and black-eyed Susans, gathered from the roadside ditches that flanked Willow Creek. Evelyn's fingers brushed the glass, cool and unexpected. You didn't have to. Riley shrugged, a gesture that lifted one shoulder like a wave cresting. Saw them on my drive-in. Thought of Lila's sketches. She had a way of capturing the untamed stuff. They talked then, halting at first, about the weather's whims, the hurricane season brewing offshore, how the marsh grasses bent but never broke. Riley confessed her own transplant scars. Leaving Montana after her father's slow fade from dementia, the ranch sold to developers who paved paradise for parking lots. I came here chasing roots that weren't mine, she said, tracing the grain of the desk with a calloused thumb. But the soil sticks anyway. Evelyn shared fragments in return. Their first date at the county fair, Lila winning a blue ribbon for her pie, the way her laughter could chase shadows from the room. The words felt like exhaling after holding breath too long, and when Riley left with a dog-eared copy of Walden, promising to bring it back annotated, Evelyn felt the first stirrings of curiosity amid the grief. That evening, as twilight bled into navy, Evelyn wandered the garden paths they'd cleared together. The air hummed with cicadas, a chorus that swelled and ebbed like her moods. She knelt by the rosebush, its survivors unfurling tentative buds, and whispered apologies to the earth, to Lila, to the woman she'd become in absence. Sleep came easier that night, threaded with dreams of open fields where two figures walked hand in hand, their shadows merging at the edges. But fractures don't mend in straight lines. The following week brought a letter from the insurance company, a cold recital of finalized claims that tallied Lila's life in digits and disclaimers. Evelyn read it at the kitchen table, the words blurring until they formed a void. She drove to the beach, the truck's tires humming over oystershell roads, and parked where the dunes met the surf. The Atlantic stretched infinite, slate gray under overcast skies, waves gnashing at the shore like teeth bared in perpetual hunger. She kicked off her shoes, the sand cool and gritty underfoot, and walked until the water lapped at her ankles, chilling the marrow of her bones. Memories crashed with the breakers. Lila's toes curling in the foam, her voice calling Evelyn back from the undertow with promises of forever. Now the sea seemed to mock those vows, pulling at her hem like an insistent lover she no longer trusted. She sank to her knees, salt water mingling with tears, and screamed into the wind. A primal release that left her hollowed, the crash of surf the only echo. Hours later, as the sky cleared to a bruised lavender, Evelyn gathered shells, their spirals worn smooth by time's abrasion. She pocketed a whelk, its chamber empty but iridescent, a vessel for echoes. Driving home, the radio crackled with an old Patsy Cline tune, Crazy, and she sang along, voice cracking, until the cottage came into view. Riley was there, uninvited again, repairing a section of the shared fence that had sagged under summer storms. She straightened at the truck's approach, wiping sweat from her brow with a bandana, her expression shifting from focus to concern. "You look like you wrestled the devil and lost." Evelyn leaned against the hood, shells clinking in her pocket. "Something like that. Letters from hell mostly." Riley nodded, understanding blooming in her eyes like dawn over the marsh. "Want to talk? Or just sit? I've got a thermos of that god-awful chicory you Southerners swear by." They settled on the porch steps, the wood warm from the day's heat. The thermos passed between them like a talisman. Riley didn't press, letting the silence stretch companionable, broken only by the goat's distant bass and the rustle of palmettos. When Evelyn finally spoke, of the letter, the beach, the way grief clawed without mercy, Riley listened, her presence solid as the oak that shaded them. "I've been there," Riley said at last, her voice roughened by memory. "After Dad, it was like the world went monochrome. Colors came back slow in glimpses, a sunrise that didn't hurt to look at, a laugh that stuck instead of shattering." Evelyn studied her profile, the strong line of jaw softened by lantern light we'd lit against the encroaching dusk. "What brought yours back?" Riley's gaze met hers, steady and unguarded. "People who stayed. Who saw the mess and didn't run." The words landed soft, a balm on raw edges, and in that moment Evelyn glimpsed the woman beyond the neighbor, the one who mended more than fences, who carried her own quiet storms. They parted with a nod, the night air thick with unspoken invitations, and as Evelyn slipped inside, the cottage felt less like a tomb and more like a threshold. Yet the pouring out invited more to surface. The next morning Evelyn found herself rifling through Lila's closet, the hangers sighing as she pulled forth sundresses faded by sea air. Scarves knotted with the scent of lavender. She tried one on, the fabric whispering against her skin like a ghost's caress, and stared into the mirror, eyes hollowed, but alive with the echo of joy. It was too much. She folded it away, but the act cracked something open, a fissure through which light began to seep. Town brought its own tempests. At the farmer's market, where stalls overflowed with heirloom okra and sweetgrass baskets, Evelyn ran into June, an old friend from college days, her arm linked with the new partner's. Their embrace was warm, but June's questions prodded like fingers in a wound. "How are you holding up?" "Really?" Evelyn's answers faltered, the market's bustle a blur of color and chatter that amplified her isolation. Riley appeared at the edge of her vision, haggling over a crate of peaches with the vendor, her laugh carrying like a buoy. She caught Evelyn's eye and wandered over, basket brimming with produce. "Trade you a ripe one for a story. What's got that frown deeper than a well?" The lightness disarmed her, and over slices of sun-warmed fruit, Evelyn confessed the market's sting, the envy of easy affections. Riley chewed thoughtfully, juice glistening on her chin. It's not envy, Ev. It's hunger. For what's still out there. Lila wouldn't want you starving in her shadow. The nickname slipped out natural as breath, and Evelyn let it settle, warm in her chest. They walked the rows together, Riley pointing out the best figs, Evelyn sharing lore of local lore, the gullah tales woven into the air. By the time they parted, laden with bags, the sun hung high, and Evelyn's steps felt surer, the ground less prone to swallow her whole. That night, alone with the harvest, she cooked a simple succotash of corn and beans, Lila's recipe scrawled in a notebook margin. The steam rose fragrant, curling like tendrils of memory, and for the first time, eating felt like communion rather than chore. She texted Riley on impulse, a photo of the dish with thanks for the nudge. The reply came swift. Looks better than my goat chowder. Rain check on sharing sometime? Evelyn smiled into the screen, the curve unfamiliar but welcome. Sleep claimed her gently, dreams laced with fields of wildflowers where figures danced under a harvest moon, their hands brushing like promises yet to unfold. But dawn brought reckoning. A phone call from the coroner's office, final papers to sign, a formality that reopened the gash. Evelyn dressed in black, the fabric heavy as lead, and drove to the county offices, the road winding through live oaks draped in resurrection fern. The building was a squat brick affair, fluorescent lights buzzing like trapped flies, and she sat in a vinyl chair that stuck to her thighs, signing away pieces of forever. Outside, the sky wept in solidarity, rain sheeting the windshield as she emerged. She didn't see Riley's truck until it pulled alongside at the stoplight, hazard lights flashing. The window rolled down, Riley's face framed by the dash's glow. Follow me. No arguments. They ended up at Riley's farm, the barn a sanctuary of hay-scented warmth. Riley led her to the loft, where a pallet of blankets overlooked the pastures, a thermos of hot toddy waiting. Up here the world's smaller. Just fields and stars. They lay side by side, the rain drumming a lullaby on the tin roof, and Evelyn poured out the morning's poison, the signatures like chains, the finality a thief in the night. Riley's hand found hers in the dark, fingers interlacing loose but sure, a lifeline tossed into turbulent waters. You're signing to set her free, Ev. And maybe yourself. The touch lingered, electric in its simplicity, and as thunder rolled distant, Evelyn turned her face to Riley's, their breaths mingling in the loft's hush. No words passed, only the quiet understanding that some mending begins in silence, thread by thread. The rain eased by morning, leaving the world washed clean, puddles mirroring the sky's tentative blue. Evelyn woke in the loft to the scent of damp earth and Riley's quiet snores, her hands still loosely clasped in sleep. She slipped away gentle, leaving a note on the thermos. Thanks for the harbor. Coffee at mine later? The farm stirred around her, goats nosing at the fence, dew-kissed sunflowers turning faces to the light, and for a moment she lingered, tracing the horizon where sea met land, infinite and unyielding. Back at the cottage she showered off the night's salt, the water cascading like absolution. Lila's photo watched from the bathroom shelf, her smile soft and knowing, and Evelyn whispered, I'm trying love. For both of us. The words felt like a vow renewed, not to the past but to the path ahead. Riley arrived at noon, bearing a loaf of sourdough still warm from her oven, the crust crackling under her fingers. They ate on the porch, legs dangling over the edge, the bread slathered with fig preserves that burst sweet on the tongue. Conversation flowed easy now, meandering like the creek that bordered their properties. Tales of childhood escapades, Riley's summers chasing fireflies in Montana meadows, Evelyn's girlhood clamming at low tide with her grandmother, toes buried in muck. You're a natural storyteller, Riley said, licking jam from her thumb. Lila teach you that? Evelyn shook her head, gazing out at the garden where new shoots pushed through soil. She taught me to see the way light fractures on water, or how a single bloom can hold a whole season's ache. You make me want to tell again. Riley's eyes held hers, a depth there like tidal pools, secrets cradled in their brims. Good. Stories need voices. And listeners. Afternoon unfolded lazy, a collaboration born of impulse. They tackled the garden's far bed, planting salvia and lavender starts Riley had propagated from her own plots. Soil sifted through fingers dark and fertile, the act meditative, A dialogue without words. Riley hummed an old folk tune, voice low and gravel rough, and Evelyn joined in falteringly, their harmony imperfect but true. As sun dipped, casting long shadows that danced like partners, Riley paused, wiping her brow. Ever think about what comes next? After the dirt settles. Evelyn knelt back on her heels, hands caked in earth. Used to think forever was a straight line. Now, it's more like these roots, twisted, reaching blind for what nourishes. Riley nodded, her smile crooked. Twisted suits us. More interesting that way. They washed up at the outdoor spigot, water cold and shocking, laughter bubbling as mud sluiced away. Dinner was improvised, grilled shrimp from the market, tossed with greens and a vinaigrette sharp as wit. Over wine poured into mismatched mugs, they delved deeper. Riley spoke of her last love, a ranch hand named Tessa who left with the spring migration, chasing rodeo lights and leaving Riley hollowed by dust devils. She said I held too tight. Maybe she was right. Fear makes fences out of feelings. Evelyn traced the mug's rim, the ceramic warm from her palm. Lila was the brave one. Pulled me from my shelves into the world. Without her, I forgot how to step out. Their knees brushed under the table, accidental at first, then lingering, a spark in dry tinder. The air thickened with the unsaid, the porch light haloing them in amber. Riley reached across, thumb grazing Evelyn's knuckles, a question in the touch. Evelyn met it halfway, their hands linking deliberate, pulses sinking like waves to shore. That night, they parted at the door, Riley's forehead resting brief against Evelyn's, a benediction. Sleep well, storyteller. Evelyn watched her walk the path, silhouette merging with night, and closed the door on a heart that fluttered, alive with possibilities, quiet thunder. The encounter rippled outward, coloring Willow Creek's rhythms. At the library, Evelyn recommended Riley's borrowed Walden to Clara, who arched a brow and murmured, "Sounds like someone's thawing." Patrons noticed too, the lift in her step, the way her recommendations leaned toward tales of reinvention, like the Midnight Library with its doors to unlived lives. One evening as she locked up, June appeared on the sidewalk, her partner lingering by the car. "You look lighter, Ev. Like you've found your sea legs again." Evelyn hugged her tight, the embrace unforced. Maybe. Or at least stopped fighting the current. Word spread subtle in small towns, whispers of the librarian and the farmer, their fences mending in more ways than one. Evelyn felt the gaze but not the judgment. Willow Creek had its share of quiet loves, woven into the fabric like sweetgrass in baskets. Riley's farm became a second skin. Mornings found Evelyn there before dawn, feeding goats whose names she learned, stubborn for the billy with the crooked horn, whisper for the doe who nuzzled soft. Riley taught her the ropes, milking with a rhythm like breathing, checking fences for sly fox incursions. In return, Evelyn brought books from the stacks, poetry collections by Wendell Berry, evoking the land's soul, read aloud under the barn's rafters while thunder grumbled offshore. One such storm brewed fierce, winds howling like banshees, lightning stitching the sky. They hunkered in the kitchen, a pot of gumbo simmering, the air rich with rue and cayenne. Power flickered then died, leaving them to candlelight that danced shadows across Riley's face, etching vulnerability in the hollows of her cheeks. "Tell me a story," Riley said, knees drawn up on the window seat, rain lashing the panes. Evelyn thought, then spun a tale from Lila's lore. A Selkie who traded scales for human heart, only to yearn for the deep. Riley listened rapt, her hand finding Evelyn's midway, thumb stroking arcs like tides. When the story ended, Riley leaned in, breath warm against Evelyn's ear. "And the Selkie? Did she find her way back?" Evelyn turned, noses brushing, eyes locking in the flame's glow. "Maybe she did. To a deeper sea." Their lips met then, soft as landing, a question answered in salt and sweetness. It deepened slow, hands mapping familiar terrains anew. Fingers and hair, palms to cheeks, the world narrowing to this kitchen, this storm, this woman who saw her fractures and called them beautiful. They pulled apart breathless, foreheads pressed, laughter bubbling like the gumbo's bubble. "That," Riley whispered, "was a plot twist I didn't see coming." Evelyn grinned, heart full to brimming. "Best kind." The storm passed, leaving rainbows arcing over the marsh, and they stepped out into the steam rising from earth, hands clasped, the farm a canvas for their unfolding. But intimacy bred its own tempests. Doubts crept in whispers. Evelyn waking to dreams of Lila's voice, accusatory in the dark. Too soon, too soon. She pulled away subtle, canceling a shared supper with a vague headache, burying herself in library inventory until the stacks blurred. Riley noticed, of course, arriving at closing with wildflowers tucked in her pocket, their petals bruised from the drive. Talk to me, Ev. Did I push too far? Evelyn sank into the desk chair, the office's confines closing like a confessional. It's not you. It's ghost. Lila's shadow in every corner. I kissed you and it felt right, but then the guilt crashed in like a rogue wave. Riley knelt before her, hands on knees, gaze level. Guilt's a heavy anchor. But Lila loved you fierce enough to want you free. Not chained to what was. Tears welled, spilling hot. How do you know? You didn't know her. Riley's voice steadied, a rock in the royal. I know you. The way you light when you talk of her. Not dimmed but kindled. That's love that endures, not erodes. They talked until dusk bled into night, Evelyn unspooling the tangle, fears of betrayal, the terror of loving again only to lose. Riley shared her own. Tessa's leaving as a mirror to abandonment, the walls she built higher than barbed wire. We choose this, Riley said finally, rising to draw Evelyn into an embrace, chins over shoulders. Scars and all. Together. The hug lingered, bodies aligning like puzzle edges, and when they parted, Evelyn felt the anchor lift, if only to drift. They walked to Riley's truck, the stars pricking the velvet sky, and drove with windows down, wind whipping confessions into the ether. At the farm they forewent words for action, tending the sunflowers bent by storm, staking them gentle against the wind. Laughter returned in fits, shared over iced tea on the porch swing. The creak a metronome to their easing. As fireflies blinked to life, Evelyn leaned into Riley's side, head on shoulder, the weight shared now halved. You're my plot twist, she murmured, and Riley's arm tightened, a vow in the curve. Night fell soft, the goat settling, and in the quiet, Evelyn glimpsed forgiveness. Not erasure but integration, Lila's light refracted through new prisms. Weeks wove into a tapestry of tender routines, each thread pulling Evelyn further from the abyss. Mornings dawned with shared coffees on Riley's porch, mugs steaming as they planned the day. Evelyn's library hours dovetailing with Riley's market runs, evenings converging in gardens or kitchens where recipes mingled like old friends. Willow Creek seemed to conspire in their favor. The air sweeter with honeysuckle bloom, sunsets lingering longer as if reluctant to yield to night. One Saturday they drove inland to the Piedmont foothills, the truck bed laden with picnic fixings and a quilt from Lila's collection, its patterns of interlocking rings a subtle blessing. The road climbed gentle, pines giving way to hardwoods ablaze in autumn's palette, leaves carpeting the path like scattered embers. They hiked a trail to a waterfall, its cascade a silver veil over mossy rocks, the mist cooling their flushed skin. At the pool's edge, shoes discarded, they waded in, water shocking up to calves. Riley splashed first, playful as a child, droplets catching light like diamonds. Evelyn retaliated, laughter pealing true and free, echoing off granite walls. They collapsed on the bank, eventually breathless, Riley's head in Evelyn's lap as she braided wildflowers into her hair, daisies and asters, a crown for the queen of quiet revolutions. Tell me about the first time you fell, Riley said, fingers tracing Evelyn's ankle, the touch light as breath. Evelyn gazed at the falls, waters roar a white noise to memory. 15 summer camp in the Smokies. Her name was Sadie. Freckles like constellations, a laugh that started in her toes. We snuck out to the lake, hands fumbling under stars. It was clumsy, sacred, terrifying. Riley's eyes softened, no jealousy, only the warmth of witness. Mine was Tessa, under a big sky in Billings. Hayloft after branding season. She smelled of leather and sage, kissed like she meant to brand me too. They shared more as the sun arced. First heartbreaks, the sting of closets cracked open, the solace of communities found in dive bars and online forums. Evelyn spoke of Lila's proposal on a pier at sunset, Rings slipped from a crab pot's twine, simple and profound. Riley confessed her dream of a life beyond fences. A small press for farm wives' stories, voices from the soil. By dusk, as they packed the truck, Evelyn felt the stories settle like sediment, clarifying the waters. Driving home, Riley's hand on her thigh, the radio crooning Lucinda Williams, Evelyn realized understanding was the bridge they'd crossed unawares. Each revelation a plank laid over chasms. Back in Willow Creek, forgiveness bloomed deliberate. Evelyn invited Clara to tea. The library's back room transformed with scones and Lila's sketchbook open between them. "I want you to see her again," she said, flipping to a portrait of the widow, captured mid-laugh at a holiday sing-along. "And tell me if I'm honoring that." Clara's eyes misted, fingers reverent on the page. "Oh, child, you're not just honoring, you're expanding it. Like a canvas stretched wider for more light." The words unlocked something. That evening, Evelyn burned the insurance letter in the garden fire pit, flames devouring the paper as she whispered releases, to the bureaucracy of loss, to the guilt that had shackled her. Riley watched from the fence, then joined her, adding clippings from the rosebush they'd saved. "To ashes, then to earth," she toasted with a beer bottle, clinking against Evelyn's. As embers glowed, they danced slow to a phantom melody, bodies swaying in firelight, the night air velvet against skin. Riley's hands spanned Evelyn's waist, grounding, and Evelyn buried her face in the crook of her neck, inhaling earth and optimism. "I forgive myself," she murmured, the admission a key turning in long rusted locks. "For living. For loving again." Riley pulled back, cupping her face, thumbs brushing cheeks. "And I forgive the years I hid. From this. From you." Their kiss sealed it, deep and deliberate, a covenant forged in flame and forgiveness. The stars wheeled overhead, witnesses to the mending. The farm became their confessional. Over morning's milking, Riley unpacked Tessa's ghost, the way she chased adrenaline over anchor, leaving Riley to question her own worth. "I built walls thinking they'd keep hurt out. Forgot they locked me in too." Evelyn listened, then shared her own barriers. The perfectionism Lila had teased as librarian logic. The fear of mess that kept her shelving emotions neat and out of reach. "You make me want the chaos," she admitted, handing off a pail sloshing with foam. "The spills and the stories." They volunteered together at the community center, reading to children whose worlds teetered on edges. Evelyn's voice weaving tales of resilient heroines, Riley demonstrating not tying with ropes from her barn, strong and sure. One boy, wide-eyed with his own losses, tugged Evelyn's sleeve after. "Do the brave ones always win?" She knelt to his level, Riley's presence warm at her back. "They win by going on. By finding hands to hold when the path twists." The wisdom echoed her own, and later, driving home with seed packets for the center's plot, they laughed at the day's grit. Paint on cheeks from a mural session, soil under nails. At a crossroads, Riley turned to her, serious sudden. "Marry this life with me, Ev? Not papers or rings yet, but the daily. The dirt and the dawn." Evelyn's heart swelled, vision blurring joyful. "Yes. To all of it." They sealed with a kiss at the stop, truck idling, the world blurring to just them. Forgiveness extended outward too. Evelyn visited Lila's grave on a crisp All Souls morning, the cemetery a hush of marble and magnolias. She laid wildflowers, Queen Anne's lace from Riley's jar, and spoke aloud. "I see you in the light now, not the shadows. Thank you for the love that taught me to hold more." Wind stirred the petals, a reply in rustle, and peace settled, profound as tide pools at ebb. That afternoon with Riley they planted a memorial bed. Salvia for Lila's fiery spirit, lavender for enduring calm. As they patted soil firm, Evelyn felt the earth's pulse sync with her own. A heartbeat renewed, forgiving the fractures that shaped it. Evenings deepened their bond, suppers stretching into starlit talks. Riley read from her journal, entries poetic on furrows and feelings, Evelyn adding annotations in margins like love letters. One night, as frost nipped the air, they wrapped in the quilt, porch swing creaking confessions. "I was afraid you'd see me broken," Evelyn said, head on Riley's chest, heartbeat a steady drum. Riley's fingers combed her hair. "Broken? You're mosaic, Ev. Every piece catching light different." The words mended what lingered, And in that cradle of understanding, Evelyn forgave the past its cruelties, embracing the woman beside her as future's gentle cartographer. Autumn deepened its hold on Willow Creek, leaves carpeting paths in crimson and gold, the air crisp with the promise of change. Evelyn woke one dawn to frost etching the windows like lace, Riley's arm draped heavy across her waist. A new ritual, their bodies fitting like keys to locks long rusted. She slipped from bed quiet, brewing coffee in the cottage kitchen, the scent curling through rooms like invitation. Riley stirred to it, padding in barefoot, hair sleep-tousled, pulling Evelyn back against her for a kiss that tasted of dreams and domesticity. "You're my favorite alarm," Riley murmured, nuzzling her neck, and Evelyn laughed, the sound light as birdsong, scattering the last cobwebs of doubt. They breakfasted on the porch, toast with pear butter from Riley's preserves, watching mist rise from the marsh like spirits ascending. The garden thrived now, blooms defying the chill, chrysanthemums unfurling defiant, a testament to tending. Evelyn traced the trellis they built together, vines climbing ambitious, and felt the parallel in her bones. Growth not linear but layered, resilient. Workdays hummed with purpose. At the library, Evelyn curated a display on rebirth. Titles like The Overstory mingling with memoirs of widowhood turned wandering. Patrons lingered longer, drawn to her quiet radiance, sharing snippets of their own phoenix risings. Clara cornered her one lunch, eyes twinkling over her spectacles. "That farmer's got you glowing like bioluminescent bay. Don't let it flicker." Evelyn blushed, stirring her soup. "It's steady now, like a hearth fire." Evenings wove wonders. They kayaked the creek at twilight, paddles dipping silent, herons unfolding wings like paper lanterns. Riley pointed out constellations emerging. Cassiopeia the Chained Queen, freed in myth, and Evelyn countered with stories from Lila's lore, Greek echoes in southern skies. Laughter echoed over water, their boats drifting close, hands trailing to link across the divide. One weekend, they harvested the farm's late tomatoes, vines heavy with fruit blushed ruby. Juice-stained fingers as they plucked, the sun a benevolent eye. Riley taught her canning, jars sealing with satisfying pings, shelves lining up like soldiers of sustenance. "For winters," she said, wiping her hands, "when the ground sleeps, we remember summer's gift." Evelyn sealed the last, lid hissing approval. "And for the lean times, proof we can fill our own." Their love flowered in intimacies small and vast. Notes tucked in lunch bags, thinking of your hands in mine, read amid library stacks. Slow dances in the barn to fiddle tunes on an old radio, boots scuffing hay. Stargazing from the truck bed, quilt cocooning them against night's chill, whispers mapping futures. A joint garden for the community, trips to Montana's big skies. Yet rebirth stirred its own churnings. Evelyn dreamed vivid now, Lila appearing not accusatory but advisory, her form translucent as sea glass. "Dance while you can," she'd say, fading into light, and Evelyn woke renewed, turning to Riley with kisses fervent, bodies entwining in sheets tangled as vines. She tackled Lila's studio, canvases stacked like deferred dreams. With Riley's steady hand she sorted, some to donate, capturing Willow Creek's soul for others to frame, hung anew in the cottage, colors bleeding joy rather than ache. One afternoon, painting together, Evelyn's brush tentative on fresh linen, Riley's bold strokes evoking fields, they created a diptych. One panel Lila's waves crashing, the other Riley's sunflowers standing tall, bridged by a horizon shared. "It's us," Evelyn said, stepping back, paint smeared and alive. Waves meeting earth. Riley wrapped arms around her from behind, chin on shoulder. Endless. Fertile. The town embraced their renewal. At the harvest festival amid hayrides and kettle corn, they strolled hand in hand unchallenged, June toasting them with cider, children from the center swarming for piggybacks. Evelyn judged the pie contest, awarding blue to a young baker whose crust flaked perfect, whispering, "Your grandmother would approve," to the girls' delight. Riley entered the preserve category, her pear butter taking ribbon, and Evelyn pinned it to her apron with exaggerated ceremony, drawing cheers. As bonfire crackled later, sparks ascending like prayers, they swayed to bluegrass fiddles, bodies close, the crowd a blur of goodwill. But inner rebirth demanded confrontation. Evelyn joined a grief circle at the church hall. Circle of folding chairs and flickering candles, voices overlapping in shared sorrow. She spoke halting at first, of the crash's echo, the garden's resurrection, then fluid, Riley's imagined presence bolstering. A woman named Cora, widowed young, gripped her hand. "You're rising, dear. Like yeast in dough, slow but inevitable." The validation fermented, and homecoming to Riley's embrace felt like arrival. "Proud of you," Riley said, over stew simmered slow, "for voicing the invisible." Evelyn leaned across the table, kissing her spice-dusted nose. "You gave me the words. And the why." Winter whispered warnings, first frost glazing pumpkins, winds off the Atlantic sharpening. They winterized together. Battening shutters, stacking cordwood in the shed, the labor a liturgy of preparedness. One gale-lashed night, power out again, they huddled by the hearth Evelyn had coaxed to life, logs popping tails. Riley recited Montana lore. How her mother wove willow baskets to hold the harvest heart, while Evelyn countered with gullah ring shouts, rhythms clapping shadow puppets on walls. In the fire's lap they made love gentle exploratory, hands learning contours anew, breath sinking to the storm's cadence. No rush, only reverence, bodies speaking forgiveness in arches and sighs. Afterward, curled skin to skin, Evelyn traced Riley's collarbone, constellation of freckles. This is rebirth, not replacement. Expansion. Riley kissed her temple, voice husky. "You're my spring, Ev." After the longest freeze, dawn broke clear, snow flurrying rare and fleeting, blanketing the farm in hush. They ventured out, boots crunching crust, building a figure from the drift. Two faces merged, arms outstretched to sky. Laughter rang as snowballs flew, cheeks rosy, hearts thawed. Evelyn felt it then, profound. The self she'd lost in wreckage, reforged in these fires, stronger, softer, woven with others' threads. No longer adrift but rooted, branches reaching for light. Winter yielded reluctant to spring's coaxing. Willow Creek stirring from slumber with dogwood blossoms unfurling pink against azure skies. The cottage and farm blurred boundaries now. Evelyn's books lining Riley's shelves, goats wandering the garden fence for treats. Morning's chorus with birds reclaiming territory, their song a fanfare to days laced with light. Evelyn's steps carried buoyancy, the library a haven not just of stories but her own unfolding narrative. She hosted author nights, drawing crowds for readings on resilience, poets reciting odes to fractured moons mending whole. Clara beamed from the front row, whispering post-event, "You've become the tale, dear, the one that inspires." Riley thrived too, her small press venture sprouting tentative. Chapbooks of local voices, farm wives penning haikus on tilling and tending. Evelyn edited proofs over dinners, red pen gentle, their debates sparking like fireflies, passion's healthy friction. One evening as they collated pages by lamplight, Riley paused, ink-stained fingers lacing with Evelyn's. "This us the work. It's the light I chased across states." Evelyn squeezed, pulse thrumming. "And I found mine here. In the quiet roar of waves and your laugh." Spring's symphony swelled. They planted the community bed, schoolchildren's hands patting soil around seedlings, giggles mingling with earth scent. Evelyn read planting parables, Jack and the Beanstalk recast as metaphor for nurture, while Riley demonstrated compost's alchemy, turning decay to bloom. The boy from before, now beaming, planted a sunflower seed. "For the brave ones," he said, and Evelyn knelt, hugging him fierce. Love deepened in layers like the marsh's tidal shifts. Picnics on dunes, baskets brimming with Riley's cheeses and Evelyn's salads, waves lapping lazy. They swam naked at midnight, moon silvering skin, bodies buoyant in brine, kisses tasting of salt and starlight, hands gliding like current. No urgency, only union, the sea cradling their joy. They traveled light. A weekend to the Outer Banks, lighthouse climbing for vistas vast, wind whipping hair as they traced Kitty Hawk's sands where dreams took flight. Atop Cape Hatteras, arms linked, Evelyn voiced a vision. A life like this, adventures small, anchors deep. Riley nodded, eyes sea bright. "With you? Count me winged." Homecomings amplified the glow. Candlelit suppers of foraged ramps and fresh trout, wine loosening tongues to dreams deferred. Riley sketched plans for a greenhouse, glass haven for winter greens. Evelyn proposed a story hour at the farm, tales under tinted oaks. Their visions intertwined, a blueprint for tomorrows. Challenges came gentle, testing the weave. A late frost nipped the tomatoes, Riley's frustration flaring brief. Curses at the sky, hands clenched. Evelyn drew her inside, brewing tea strong, listening as Riley unpacked the fear. Failures echo from Montana's lost ranch. What if I can't provide the roots I promised? Evelyn cupped her face steady. Roots aren't just yield. They're persistence. We replant. Together. The frost passed, sprouts resilient, and Riley's gratitude bloomed in a garden bed of heirloom roses. Thorns tamed, petals velvet as vows. Evelyn's own shadows surfaced in solstice quiet. A letter from Lila's sister, enclosing photos from their last Christmas, joy frozen in gloss. Tears came unbidden. Evelyn curling on the porch as dusk fell. Riley found her there, wordless at first, then wrapping her in the quilt, rocking slow. Let it come. I'm the shore. Words followed, Evelyn voicing the bittersweet. Gratitude laced with longing, the whole never filled but honored. Riley shared a token. A locket from her mother, engraved light after long night, slipping it around Evelyn's neck. For the lights that stay. Old and new. The gesture anchored and they rose renewed, walking the beach under emerging stars, footprints mingling in wet sand, waves erasing singular trails. Community wove them tighter. The harvest fair returned, ribbons claimed anew, Evelyn's pie, crust woven with Riley's tips. Riley's preserves, jars glowing like lanterns. They danced under strung bulbs, fiddles wailing joyful, hands clasped as the circle spun. June pulled them aside, post-reel, eyes misty. You too. You're Willow Creek's best story. Laughter bubbled, Evelyn leaning into Riley. Ours is just chapter 1. As seasons cycled, their love matured, deepening roots branching wide. They adopted a stray cat, gray as storm clouds, named Echo for her purr's resonance. Mornings found her curled between them, a furry bridge. Evenings they read aloud. Evelyn's choices romantic realists, Riley's frontier fictions. Voices blending in the lamplight, pages turning like tides. One equinox eve they hiked the lighthouse trail again, wildflowers crowning their brows. At the summit, sea endless below, Riley knelt, not dramatic but deliberate, offering a ring of twisted oak and pearl, simple as their start. Marry me, Evelyn Harper? To the waves, the fields, the whatever comes. Tears pricked joyful, Evelyn pulling her up into embrace. Yes, to all the lights. They kissed as gulls wheeled, horizon swallowing sun and fire, the world their witness. Life's light illuminated further. The press published its first volume, Soil Songs, launch at the library drawing kin from afar. Riley's brother toasting from Montana, Lila's sister hugging Evelyn tight, whispering, she's smiling somewhere. Sales funded the greenhouse, glass rising like a promise, greens thriving through winter's grasp. Evelyn's rebirth echoed in art. A series of sketches, Lila's style infused with Riley's boldness, women arm in arm against tempests, blooms from barren ground. She exhibited locally, walls alive with color, patrons murmuring awe. Riley hung the show's centerpiece. Mended horizons, two figures bridging sea and soil. Through it, Evelyn felt whole. Not seamless but harmonized, scars silvered like moon on water. Riley's presence the constant, her touch the reminder. Love as rebirth, endless as the Atlantic sigh.